so far I have talked about some optical absorption in solids, in semiconductors, and I will also tell you at this point that how actually one can obtain energy band structures. Okay. For example, so far it appears as if that the energy bands that we are talking about is all in the air, and is there any experimental confirmation of that one? Yes, you can actually get this thing. We can obtain both density of states, we can obtain both density of states as well as the energy versus momentum dispersion curves. Both of them rely on photo emission experiments. For example, you can think of a photo emission experiment where you have a light of some frequency h nu is used to knock off electrons in the band, and what you do is measure their kinetic energy. Kinetic energy of the electrons. So, if you have used monochromatic radiation, then h nu minus E kinetic will be the energy of the band. Energy of the electron is a solid, E electron is energy of the electron in the solid. So, you can get the measure of the energy. Now, if you can count the number of electrons, that is in the sense that if you can measure the current, which is what is done in photo emission spectroscopy in PES, if we also measure the current, which is actually done in photoelectron spectroscopy, one need not say that actually. So, then current is proportional to number of electrons that have been knocked off, and so is proportional to density of states. Of course, there are various issues in this one. For example, electrons can get scattered. So, not all electrons reach the detector. So, this is one, and then second thing is that the cross section for electron removal, that is ionization of the system, is not the same for all the states. So, if we have some band structure information, then it is possible still proportional to the number of electrons that have been removed at a particular energy. So, we have and the quantum yield is roughly the same for many states for the region of something like a few electron volts within the solid. So, what I am saying here is that you can get density of states from PES, and this is for the occupied states of the occupied states. So, if you want to get the density of states of the conduction band or the empty band, to get the density of states of the unoccupied bands or unoccupied states band levels, one does what is called inverse photo emission experiment, is also called or the Bremsstrahlin isochromat spectroscopy. In this, what you do is you actually shoot electrons of some known energy they are captured by the solid and excess energy is given out as light. As light quanta. So, measure the frequency of the emitted light this gives you the energy of the band level which was empty. That means energy of the state k that it occupies is actually plus the energy of the light quanta that is emitted is equal to kinetic energy of the electrons that is shown on the specimen. Of course, when you say isochromat, this is not what one does. What one does is always measure light intensity of a fixed frequency and vary the energy of the electron beam. So, that way when you say isochromat means single color, so that is what you are measuring, the fixed frequency, and you are varying the energy of the electron beam. And this effect was known. Bremsstrahlin actually means breaking frequency. It's a German word. Means electrons are braked by the solid and in the process light is emitted, okay, and so that is called the Bremsstrahlin light. So, it is much like an automobile getting braked into a particular parking lot or so, and so that is what happens. And of course, once again light intensity is related to the density of states. So, this is how you can get the density of states, unoccupied states. You can do it either for solid or for molecules to get the energies of the unoccupied molecular orbitals or the antibonding orbitals. Now, this is okay with density of states. How does one get the dispersion? To do this, you do what is called ARPES experiment. It stands for angle resolved photoemission spectroscopy. this what you are doing is you have this sample surface of the sample, and on this you hit with light. Okay, so light is coming in here and the electrons are going out in that direction, and the perpendicular direction is the z, then you have the x and the y. So, if we measure the angle theta and the angle phi, theta and phi, we know the direction of the momentum of the outgoing electron. Electron that is outgoing. Now, if you also measure the energy, then we know magnitude of the vector k from where you have removed the electron. So, this is given by h cross times root of m times E. E is the energy of the emitted electron. Now, you assume the following, that is, because the electron has to leave the surface, the k vector perpendicular to the surface, the k vector component perpendicular to the surface is not conserved. What I mean by this is that the k perpendicular is not the same for the electron in solid and after emission. That is, the k perpendicular is not conserved. So, whatever was the k perpendicular of the electron inside the solid will not be the same of when it comes out with the the wave vector k as you measure from the ARPACE experiment. So, but kx and ky are conserved. This is the assumption, ky of the electron inside the solid and after ejection or emission are the same. So, which means that if you look at the geometry that I have got here, so if I take h cross root me sin theta, that corresponds to the k vector in the plane that is parallel, and h cross root me cos theta is the one that is in the perpendicular direction of the emitted electron. So, what I have is the following, that is k parallel magnitude is equal to h cross root me sin theta, and k perpendicular, say k perpendicular magnitude is equal to h cross root me cosine theta. So, now using the polar coordinates I can get kx and ky. Kx is equal to h cross times root me sine theta cos phi, and ky is equal to h cross times root me sine theta sine phi. But k perpendicular or kz inside the solid is not equal to k perpendicular. Kz inside the solid is not the same as k perpendicular. Because an energy of say V naught is lost in the ionization process. There is ionization energy for the electron. So, that means that if you want to get the energy of the momentum vector kz inside the of the electron inside the solid, that will be h cross times root 2 m e cos squared theta plus V naught. So, this is the kz. So, once you can get kx, ky and kz, so we can get kx, ky and kz of the electron inside the specimen and the energy of the electron as we know photon energy h nu and the kinetic energy of the outgoing electron. So, using these two you can get the energy band dispersions, but it is not a simple experiment, but people have obtained it and it is really accurate for layered compounds. Because the dispersion in the z direction is almost nothing. So, it is a flat band in the z direction. So, one need not worry about trying to get kz in layered structures. Well, this is something that I wanted to tell you about how one can get energy band dispersion curves from experiments. Now, what I am going to talk about is some of these optical experiments on semiconductors at low temperatures. So, if we conduct, so actually let me give a title to the topic. We will discuss what are called excitons. In this, supposing we do the optical absorption experiments at very low temperatures, like below liquid nitrogen temperatures and depending upon the energy of the excitons, probably below at about liquid helium temperatures. Then what one sees is that at low temperatures we observe transitions below the band gap. So, if I were to draw a conduction band and a valence band, then this excitation energy is the band gap excitation. So, the gap, but below this you do find energy levels which are so there are many levels. So, these are called excitonic levels. So, this is seen in things like, for example, you can look at it in germanium, or for example the other materials like indium antimonide and so forth. You can see that. So, basically these are all in materials which are low band gap materials, low band gap semiconductors. So, actually they have observed this in gallium arsenide earlier and also cuprous oxide. I will talk about it a little more in detail. So, in this case what happens? Why is it that, what is the origin of these levels below the band gap? What is the origin is the following. So, when you create an excitation, then you create an electron and a hole, okay, and in principle this electron and hole should be moving around independently. We expect electron and hole to move independently, as they do not interact, as they are not supposed to interact in a model. In a band picture at least. But what common sense tells me is that if electron and hole are in the vicinity of each other, then they will have a stabilization, then they are more stable than if they are moving independently. So, if they are moving together, then I have an electron and a hole, and you can think of it as a hydrogenic system. So, they are moving around each other. Okay. This is a hydrogenic system. But because the electron and hole have very similar masses, their kinetic energy of the system is given by h cross squared upon 2 mu del squared is the kinetic energy. Where mu is a reduced mass which is given by m electron m hole divided by m electron plus m hole, are usually written as 1 upon mu equal to 1 upon me plus 1 upon mh. And they also are, there is a Coulombic attraction between them. And the Coulombic attraction is actually given by, the attractive potential is given by u of r is equal to minus E squared upon epsilon r. Epsilon is the dielectric constant of the medium. And So, now you see that this is almost a hydrogenic system. So, the excitonic system is a hydrogenic system. So, the energy is given by Bohr formula except for a dielectric constant that comes into picture. So, I have E n is equal to minus of mu e to the power 4 divided by 2 h cross squared epsilon squared n squared. So, n equal to 1 is the ground state of this. And these are all lying below the conduction band edge. So, actually you add a term E.g. if we are taking the energy of the valence bond top as the reference energy. So, this is measured with respect to valence band top edge as shown in the figure below. So, what you see here is that the binding energy I can define of the exciton as follows. We can define it as the energy at the conduction band edge minus E1. This is the exciton binding energy. So, which means that you have the conduction band edge, you have the valence band edge here, and this is the energy gap. So, this is where your n equal to 1 state is, then you will have the n equal to 2, n equal to 3 and so forth going all the way up. The exciton binding energy typically EB is typically of the order of a few millielectron volts. Okay. And that is because you see the dielectric constant epsilon is of the order of 10 and mu is of the order of say maybe 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever, let us assume it is 0.1, then in that case it will become the Rydberg divided by 10 to the power 3 is equal to E1, because you have the mu upon E squared epsilon squared. So, that is about 10 to the 3, and this is like 13.6 millielectron volts. And let us see the Bohr radius of the exciton. Okay. So, let us look at the Bohr radius of the exciton. This is actually given by a exciton is equal to epsilon times m by mu times the Bohr radius of the hydrogen atom. M is free electron mass, mu is reduced mass, and epsilon is of course the dielectric constant. So, for these values you get A x is roughly about 100 times the hydrogenic Bohr radius, or about 50 angstroms. So, which means it is really spread out over many lattice sites. This exciton is spread over many lattice sites. Roughly of the order of about 100 lattice sites in each dimension. So what we have is what are called highly delocalized excitons, and these excitons are called Mott-Wannier excitons. How do you know that there are actually excitons in solids other than the optical absorption experiment? One of the things is that excitons should not contribute to electrical conductivity. That is because it is neutral, electron and hole move together. So when they move together, there is no charge in the particle which is the exciton, and so it should not cause any current. So supposing I do take a semiconductor and do a photoconductivity experiment. In the photoconductivity experiment, the threshold frequency or the threshold energy is EC. But on the other hand, optical absorption experiments the threshold energy is less than EC by actually the exciton binding energy. So since you see this difference in the threshold of the photoconductivity and the optical absorption experiment, you know that there is an exciton, and although excitons do not contribute to conductivity, excitons through diffusion contribute to thermal conductivity. Because only energy needs to be carried from one side to the other. So an excited exciton can go from the hot end and give out the energy at the cold end to give you a ground state exciton. So that's one example you can think of. So this is one kind of excitons. Okay, these are observed in inorganic conventional semiconductors. Examples already I gave you. So they have experiments, if you look at Kittel's solid state physics book, then you will see that he has shown this for Cu2O, and he has also shown it for indium antimonide, I think. So these are the two systems for which he has shown, or indium antimonide, no, it's actually gallium arsenide he gives. And in copper oxide he sees a progression of excitonic levels whose energies are given by En is proportional to 1 upon n squared. So that really confirms the model that we have been talking about largely. Okay, I think I will stop here discussing these kinds of Mott-Wannier excitons. In the next lecture, I will discuss about another kind of excitons in other kinds of insulators and molecular solids, which are called Frenkel excitons. So we will meet again. Thank you.